Let's dive right back into the realm of the weird. After the last review was not so great, we need to talk about something that actually is, just so we can kind of restore our footing to solid ground. It's actually coming in the form of Jack White and his new album, Lazaretto. This is 2 years after his first successful solo album, Blunderbuss, an album that has since gone gold and was #1 on the U.S. Billboard charts, as well as other charts throughout the corner of the world, whichever corner that you're from. There's a good chance that it was high up on there. It was a great album. It was one that definitely showcased his creativity, not to mention his multitude of styles, while not 100% veering too far off course from his rock roots. With Lazaretto, I feel like he's going a little bit deeper into those multiple styles that really make some casual appearances throughout most of his music, even with his former band, the White Stripes, and definitely some of these styles that were incorporated and showcased in some traces on his previous LP also. This is instead something where I feel that this randomness, this weirdness, this very unconventional way of going about music that is very unique to Jack White really actually is encountered full circle by a listener, and it's something where they start to realize that this has always been Jack White's primary strength as a songwriter. This is something where you can see roots of, garage rock, Americana, psychedelic rock. You can see even traces of the blues on the very first track, Three Women. And it's all something that comes together and is packaged very, very nicely. This is certainly an album that if you are a strange fan of alternative rock and really likes this work that is a little bit more teetering on the strange and kind of the out there, the very explorative side of the genre, then this is an album that you're going to find very quickly to be one of your best friends here in 2014, if not perhaps your greatest ally. This is an album that is able to boast so many different unique facets to it that really makes it a true embodiment of what Jack White is all about. He's all about going into his own personal home studio and basically starting to jam, starting to write, starting a track, and then having it morph, having it really transform itself into something. And it's not, he no longer uses the approach of songwriting where whatever it starts off as is eventually morphed into his trademark style. This is instead something where Jack White is exploring different styles, where he's exploring different sounds, where if something goes in one particular direction, he doesn't feel like it should be, transformed into his signature style or anything of that regard. He instead just lets the session continue onward and kind of goes with it wherever it seems to really take it. It's a very organic form of music making. It's something that a lot of people say that they want to do and say that they really want to try to accomplish or try, but seldom actually do, mainly because they feel that it's not a very safe haven to really venture into. And whenever you think about it, it really isn't. It's something that's very scary for a lot of artists to do, considering their fans and people that really enjoy their work really know them from a particular style, from a particular thing in which they do very well. And kind of venturing outside that box definitely opens them up to a lot of critique, a lot of criticism, and the potential for losing their fans. A lot of fans are very, very hard-pressed to actually expand their own personal horizons here in 2014, where there definitely seems to be a bit of musical ADD, as well as just regular ADD. I like the fact that this album really doesn't need to maintain itself as far as a pace is concerned. It doesn't need to stay a rip-roaring torrent the whole entire time in which it's furying through its 11 tracks, and it's not one that needs to slow down to a crawl to really punctuate or accentuate anything. This is instead something that really goes at its own pace, does its own thing, and really exists by and large by itself. A track like What Would You Fight For My Love actually features a couple of seconds of just pure silence after the introduction, which is something that is also kind of a gamble, I must say. Anytime that you have silence really punctuate the point in time in which an introduction is about to go into a main riff, you really have to make sure that that punctuation is met with something that really warrants it, that really makes it worth it. And this track actually executes that quite well. The beginning of this starts off with a little bit more of an upper tempo and then really just slides itself down into a low end before furying to a finish. And I really enjoy the way in which this song was constructed, principally because it's one that kind of flows by its own rules. Even though it does have a standard and convention, it's still one that definitely feels very freeform and has a very organic approach to it, and I really enjoy that. As you move along the album, you're going to definitely note this, and this is an album that also, I must say, can fit both as background noise for you at a dinner party or something like that, or it can be something that you can be, traveling down the freeway and blasting at full volume. It definitely has a very all-encompassing reach, even though it is so strange. In fact, the diversity and the dynamic nature of this album is actually what boasts itself as one of its largest allies, one of its largest helpers in ensuring that this is an album that you can play in basically any setting. Although the best setting to really listen to this album is all by yourself, maybe with a pair of cheap headphones. Either that or a nice pair of studio headphones hooked up to a nice system where you're playing the LP record as opposed to just the standard CD. Whenever you get to the latter portion of the album, songs such as that Black Bat Licorice, I Cannot Speak, God Damn It, really accentuate Jack White's, kind of quirky side, the one that really showcases a lot of taut humor while at the same time really maintaining a lot of focus. I think I Found the Culprit is something that I would probably put on like a Hannibal Lecter playlist because, especially because of the television show, because it seems to really have a really funny, just, very quirky, but at the same time very true message to it. It's punctuated well, while, Wanton Able sounds like it's something that's rejected from a Dr. Seuss, movie or a Dr. Seuss, made-for-TV documentary or something like that. The one song that I do have to say is very powerful to me is track number 8, which is Entitlement. This is a song that actually gets very real on the lyrical side. It's something where Jack White seems very disillusioned toward today's youth and how they feel entitled toward everything. This is a concept that we've tackled here on this channel with the, I think it was 5, ways to tell that America's society sucks or something like that. It's a video that was released during the 24 hours of coverkillernation in 2013. But this is a song that has a very potent realism to it, one that's very honest, and one that feels almost as though Jack White himself is scolding all of the youth of America, basically telling them to wake up and realize that you're not entitled to jack shit. I really enjoy the fact that he's able to punctuate this fact, even though the music that swirls behind it doesn't have that same direct approach. This is instead something that almost sounds a little bit more like a conventional rock song that has a little bit of a weird trace here and there, but in reality you wouldn't expect a song that sounds this way to have such a direct, fierce, and really very real message. I enjoy the fact that Jack is able to do this because, personally, as a lyricist, it's something where the music in my head always kind of illuminates that which I write, as opposed to that which I write kind of being illuminated by different styles of music or potentially having a negative message be shrouded by positive music. Overall, this album really showcases a lot of the weird little quirks that Jack White has. Does it surpass its predecessor, Blunderbuss? I really don't think that it does. In fact, I think it falls just a little bit short. But then again, that's a really hard album to top. That album just had hit after hit, really, one after the other. There was just really not a bad song on that album. In fact, if I would have reviewed it, I probably would have given it the closest thing to an alternative album perfect score, principally because it was an album that I could go back to over and over again and never ever feel bored, and always feel like the material was fresh and still relevant. With this album, I feel like it may have a little bit of a date to it, where perhaps once the next one comes out, this is an album that won't necessarily be forgotten about, but I think it's going to be one that's going to be explored by a lot of people kind of after the fact, especially whenever album number 3 comes out. They might put this on, but it won't be until long after they digested the new record, or long after they've digested Blunderbuss if they happen to get both of these albums at the same time. Even with that said, I'd have to give it an 87 out of 100, which really showcases the solid number that its predecessor would have gotten. I probably would have given Blunderbuss like a 96 out of 100. But either way, it's still a good album, and really showcases a lot of, diversity, not to mention a lot of great dynamics. This is an album that does have a flow, even though it flows at its own pace, and it's also one that just really kind of accentuates what Jack White is all about. For those of you who don't know, Neil Young just actually put out a new album entitled A Letter Home, which Jack White produced. In fact, it was all done on one of those old carnival machines where you could record your voice. So yeah, it has a really dated sound to it from the early 1950s or even earlier than that, which actually makes it sound kind of neat, but it's an album that's not easy to digest based around this, mainly because it's a little bit difficult to hear. However, based around pure novelty, it's a hell of an album, and it's definitely one that I would rather hear on vinyl LP rather than hear on just a CD, because I feel like if you're going to have an album with that vintage sound to it, you should really own it on the vintage format. What did you guys think about Lazaretto? Is this an album that you really enjoyed? Did you enjoy this more than you enjoyed Blunderbuss or anything from the White Stripes catalog? What do you think about the Dead Weather or the Raconteurs or anything else Jack White's been a part of? What do you think about the man in general? Let me know in the comments, and I'll talk to you guys later.